Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Getting Unstuck workshop. In this section, we'll be talking about the CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy model of depression. And this section will be building off of a lot of concepts and ideas that are discussed much more thoroughly in part 1 of the Getting Unstuck workshop. Part 1 is called Defining Depression. So if you have not already listened to or gone through that module, I'd recommend going back and doing that now before continuing further with part 2. As we begin talking about the cognitive behavior therapy model of depression, what we're going to be focused on is the connection and interactions between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that will occur in response to all situations that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to focus on this slide on one specific example of a situation and the different thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that a person might experience, and specifically thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that a person who is depressed might experience in response to this situation. And though this is the same situation we discussed in part 1, this time, as you'll see, we're going to get a little bit more detailed about that response. And by breaking it down into these 3 categories, it can be helpful to gain a better understanding of how did I get from point A of this situation to point B of what I'm doing. So again, situation here, get a bad grade on an exam. So by the situation, all we're referring to initially is just seeing that grade, whatever it is. So we'll start at the top here and focus on thoughts, and then we'll go to emotions and then behaviors. So when seeing this bad grade, this specific person is thinking, I'm a failure, I'll always fail, and there's no point in trying. Now, these may be thoughts some of you may be able to relate to, some may not. People are all going to have different thoughts in response to seeing a bad grade on an exam. Someone who's depressed might have these particular thoughts due to underlying beliefs that they already believe they're a failure or just are doomed to not succeed in academics. And this can relate to that thought of there's no point in trying, because if I know I'm just going to fail anyway, why would I want to put forth all the effort of trying? Then from those thoughts, we'll move to emotions. So this person's feeling sad, ashamed, and afraid. And it's important and helpful here to try to make a connection between those thoughts and the emotions. So someone who is thinking, I'll always fail, feeling sad, we can sort of make sense of that by thinking about how it would be sad to just reflect on and think of ourselves as a failure. We all would feel sad if we kind of had this certainty that we're just a failure as a person. Then feeling ashamed, again, kind of related to this idea of I'm a failure, and that can be embarrassing, and one would likely feel bad about themselves for being a failure. And then the fear can come from that I'll always fail idea. So fear relating this into the future and thinking I'll always fail. Now I'm afraid of what's my future going to hold. It doesn't seem like anything good's going to happen because I'll always fail. And it's important to also recognize how these emotions feed back into the thoughts. So as someone is feeling more sad, they might start to have other thoughts. They might start to have thoughts regarding death or thoughts around just not wanting to see other people due to shame, things like that. So not only do the thoughts lead to the emotions can also contribute back to more thoughts and back and forth, and sort of like a cycle. So next, we'll look at the behaviors here. So this specific person is isolating in their room, avoiding friends, sleeping more than usual, and not eating. So again, in looking for connections, we'll start with the thoughts again. So this person thinking that I'm a failure, isolating in their room, so we can see how someone who feels like a failure might feel sad, and that sadness can come with lack of motivation and thus isolating in their room. Similarly, thinking I'm a failure, as we talked about, can relate to this emotion of shame, and a feeling of shame often leads us to want to isolate because we don't want to see other people while we're feeling so bad about ourselves. So same goes with avoiding friends there. This idea of the thoughts of I'm a failure, the feelings of shame and sadness, and just not wanting to see other people. Sleeping more, again, can come from just fatigue, can come from this line of thinking, as well as like sadness can just leave us feeling really tired a lot of the time. Same goes with not eating, that just these feelings, these thoughts can lead to a lack of appetite, and then the manifestation of that in our behaviors that we don't eat. So that's all kind of how thoughts and emotions can contribute to the behaviors, but again, this can work in reverse as well. So the more we isolate, the more likely we are to feel sad, ashamed, maybe afraid of what might happen if I were to see other people, because now it's been so long since I have, and what if I don't know how to interact with people anymore? Same goes for more thoughts. Like the more I'm isolating in the room, the more I might start to think negative thoughts about myself, such as I'm a failure, I'm a waste, or no one wants to see me, because I haven't had any experiences of other people being happy to see me because no one's seen me at all. So again, the important idea here is this connection between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, how these are going to be different for different people, and that in depression, a lot of these thoughts, emotions, and behaviors contribute to that downward spiral that we talked about in part 1, that the more we're having these negative thoughts and isolating and just doing other things that we wouldn't typically do as part of like a happy, fulfilling life, the more we experience these emotions and the more those behaviors become perpetuated. Now we're going to look at a different situation and also in a bit of a different context and include physical sensations as well. So the idea here is we're still focused on the same model, this cognitive behavioral model that focuses on connections between thoughts, emotions, behaviors. Can also be helpful to include our physical sensations as they contribute. And this model kind of breaks it down a little bit more, and what that does is basically helps us to gain a better understanding of what specifically happened for me and when this situation happened. What was going through my mind? What was I feeling? What was going on in my body? What did I end up doing? And how do all those things connect to one another? Which can also be helpful to start noticing patterns and things like that, as chances are you'll have some overlap in these different sections based on different situations that you'll experience. So first I'll go through this specific situation, and then I'll talk a little bit about how to utilize the blank copy that's included with this module. So first, again, we'll start with the situation. This situation is I have a group assignment due for my class. I don't have a group yet, so I asked a fellow classmate to be my partner, but she declined. Now, to get through sort of my reaction in this situation, I'm going to start on the right side with the cognitive box and then move to the physical reaction, emotional reaction, behavioral reaction. So cognitive side is again thoughts. So the questions that are there used to help guide your own use of this form. So what went through your mind when you felt depressed? What did that say or mean about you or about the situation? So in this instance, I'm having the thoughts, I knew I shouldn't have asked her. She's way smarter than me and she knows it. Another thought of if we had worked together, I only would have brought down the grade. Also thinking I'm so stupid and thinking she must hate me. Next, we'll look at the physical reactions, or in other words, when depressed, what physical sensations did you experience? What did you notice in your body? So in this case, noticing an upset stomach, feeling tired, a loss of appetite, feeling really hot as well. So a lot of those things you'll recognize from our original discussion of the different symptoms of depression. The upset stomach, tired or fatigue, loss of appetite, things like that. Now, next we'll look at the emotions. So what emotions came up for you when you felt depressed? And when we say emotions, we're looking for like a one-word response here. So you'll see a list of a whole variety of different emotions. So feeling sad, feeling ashamed, embarrassed, rejected, lonely, irritable. So again, we can kind of connect this back to some of the different thoughts we're having. So feeling sad can relate to this idea of I only would have brought down the grade if she had agreed. Same goes with feeling ashamed. This idea of I'm so stupid can lead us to feel really ashamed. Might also feel embarrassed when thinking I knew I shouldn't have asked her. Thinking she must hate me can lead one to feel rejected and lonely. And then one might also feel irritable thinking she must hate me, because it can just be, might feel like irritable, angry about the fact that this other person rejected you. Then coming down to the bottom and the behavioral responses. So what was your first instinct and or response, and what did you do and or avoid doing? Important distinction there, because a lot of times if we were to just think of it as what did I do, might come back with a response of nothing. So it's important to also recognize what did I not do. So in this instance, the initial response is I want to avoid asking anyone else in case they say no. And in order to do that, I left class early and haven't found a partner to work with. And I'll also avoid talking to the person I had asked who said no. I'm going to avoid talking to her in the future. So again, we can kind of connect this to the feelings of feeling embarrassed and ashamed and sad. Again, the behaviors that come about as a result of those emotions being avoiding talking to the specific person because I'm embarrassed, leaving class early because I feel ashamed and just don't want to be around other people in that instance. Can also relate these behaviors to the different physical sensations. So a lot of times if we have an upset stomach, we're probably just going to want to get out of the room. And then can also relate to the behaviors to the thoughts, such as she must hate me, so of course I want to avoid talking to her. So that's this specific example of group assignment, asking a fellow classmate to be my partner, she declines. And again, these can be big or small, a whole variety of different situations that occur in our everyday lives. So what I'll ask you to do at this point is to open that additional file. There's a blank copy of this cross-sectional formulation. And on that blank copy, try to go through a specific example of a situation that happened recently in your life, one that you can remember fairly well. And try to go through one box at a time and fill this out for yourself. Try to pay attention to what was going through my mind in that situation, what was happening in my body, what did I feel, and what did I do, / what did I avoid doing. Lastly, we'll look at that same table of all the different symptoms of depression, but this time using that CBT model, we've reorganized that table into the 4 different sections. So behaviors, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, which can just help make it a lot easier to really understand the experience of depression. Instead of this whole jumble of symptoms, we have symptoms in 4 different areas. So this table has all the same symptoms as before, they're just more organized. So under behaviors, we have the increase or reduced sleep, withdrawing from people and things that are important to us, self-medicating with alcohol and other drugs, changes to eating or weight, suicide attempts, physical restlessness or slowing, poor hygiene, crying spells. Then under thoughts, we have the reduced focus and concentration. Again, a lot of times due to just being preoccupied with other negative thoughts about ourselves. Suicidal thoughts or thoughts about death, self-critical thoughts, worry thoughts about something awful happening, thoughts of rejection, and difficulty making decisions. Again, a lot of times due to a variety of different thoughts that interfere with making decisions. Then emotions, the low mood or sadness, loss of pleasure in the things you used to enjoy. So we can think of loss of pleasure as like a lack of a feeling of pleasure that we would expect to have. Anger or irritability, guilt, shame, numbness, emptiness, hopelessness. Then physical sensations, fatigue or low energy, unexplained aches and pains, heaviness in the body, appetite disruption, gastrointestinal problems, and changes to sex drive. And with that, we will conclude Section 2 of the Getting Unstuck workshop. From today, what I recommend doing is to utilize that blank copy that was provided of the cross-sectional formulation and go through a variety of different situations in your day-to-day life and just try to gain a better understanding of what specifically happens for you in those different situations. What are the thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, and behaviors that you experience? Look for any patterns that happen in response to different situations, as well as any connections that you can see between your specific thoughts and your physical sensations and your emotions and your behaviors. And then in part 3, we will talk about more specifically behaviors and how to make sense of the different behaviors that we may or may not be doing as part of depression.